Hi, David Odell here, the Odell Complete Concrete. This is actually part 3 of a 4-part series, the entire front yard of this house. Right now what we're showing here is we're going to be showing the sod, the low voltage lighting, the sprinklers, and the valves. This is the trench that's going across the driveway. We're going to have a conduit that's going to pull the low voltage lighting through. We're going to have a 3/4 inch PVC for the water for the planter bed. That'll be a drip system over there. And we're going to have low voltage in the planter on the opposing side of the driveway, as well as in front of the new front patio area. We're using some LED lighting, which only takes 1.5 watts, and they produce equivalent of 20 watts of actual old school lighting for 1.4 watts. So it's pretty amazing what's going on with that stuff. That means my transformer, instead of a 200 watt transformer, now I only need a 50 watt transformer. So there's the low voltage. I've pulled it. I kind of pulled it through as I glued all this together. Also, when we do this underground, we always cap the ends of our water lines and we pressure test before we put concrete over the top. And that's kind of crucial. That something you always want to do if you're going to be putting concrete over pipes is pressure test everything. There's some old concrete around the water main that's coming up that goes into the house, and I wanted to get it out of there. So that was kind of surgical removal there. These are the old valves. We're going to be removing those valves. We're going to put a couple new ones in. So this is the first thing you'd want to do in any remodel is your underground. That's the first thing you got to do. So we're going to have one valve that's going to operate the entire lawn area, which is about 25 by 25 area. We're going to have about 9 heads turned way down because we've got about 100% coverage on every head. Now, because I'm using all new pipe, which are clean, you don't need to use primer for any of this pipe. The glue is all you need. It's actually better when you throw primer on those pipes. You're actually eating away at the pipe, and you actually have a worse fitting. You're actually making it worse by using primer. So I just recommend going straight with the blue glue. You can kind of see some of the stamped concrete there, and you're going to get the final overview. You can actually see the stamp process in part 2, and you'll get the overview in part 4. Of course, this is part 3. In part 1, that's the driveway area. But because we have a lot of radiuses in this where the lawn's going to go, I'm just going to dig a square trench all the way around and then I'll put some laterals into these radius spots. And that's where my sprinkler heads will go. I have a radius planter in the front of that new patio and a radius walkway, so we'll just dig square trenches and then little short lateral lines into all the radius points where I actually want a sprinkler head. Here's one of the underground items we put in before we poured concrete. We had to relocate that, so we lost where it was. We had to do a little probing, but we found it pretty quickly. So that little T there is actually going to be for the bubbler hose. They have emitters about every 1 foot. Now that's a nice start, the 1/2 inch hose with built-in emitters. But actually, when you decide what you're planning and where you're planning them at, you should plug in a 1/4 inch drip hose into that 1/2 inch and actually put a drip head right on the plan itself. Now that other roll you see there, that's my low voltage cable, and that's a 12 gauge. I like to use the heavy duty wiring. I don't like that, what is it, 16 or 14? I don't like the thin stuff. I like the thick. So we'll have a sprinkler head in all the corners. We'll have one in the middle of this yard. Here's the bubbler hose that I'm talking about with the built-in emitters. They're every 1 foot. Now, since this front yard is on a slope downhill, we can assume that the water from the sprinklers is going to want to run downhill, which means most likely the water is going to end up at the back of the sidewalk no matter what you do. So I put one less sprinkler head at the bottom end, and I put extras at the top, and then I'm just going to let gravity do the rest. You can see some of my underground from that come out from under the pour from our original driveway pour. This is where I left the stub out. Low voltage, planter, and lawn. There's only 2 valves. One valve will run both planter areas, and the other valve will run the entire lawn area. We're going with about 10-foot spacing on each head, and these particular heads are designed to spray 12 feet. So we almost have about 100% overlap, which is even if one sprinkler head failed, you'd probably still get enough water. There's a stamped concrete curb that you're going to see sealed and cleaned up in part 4. Also, you'll see the horizontal redwood fencing in part 4 in the final overview of this entire job. which is probably going to be a lot more exciting than this particular one here. Now, if you do want to do your own irrigation, this is kind of shows you the simplicity of it. I have to say, I'm not really landscape is not my main forte, but something that I like to refer to in the situation of whether I can do landscape. And what my dad told me, he said that as long as you lay the green side up, you're good to go. These particular nozzles that I'm using have a 360-degree spray radius on all of them, but they're adjustable from 0 to 360, so you can really dial them in. And they come in real handy in radius points where you don't have a true 90 or true quarter, true 3/4. You have something in between, so I typically just buy these and adjust them to my liking on every job. That's another little planter space there in the corner. Now, before I even put these heads on here, I'm just kind of adjusting what visually looks good without the water. Eventually I'll turn the water on and really dial them in really nice. This will get me close. Also, before you actually pressurize with your heads, you want to remove all your heads, just the top part, because there's a screen in there and there'll be a lot of glue that blows out initially, excess glue from all the fittings. So remove all the heads, blow the water out, and put one head back on at a time from the end of the line, working your way back. That way all the glue and debris is blown out of your line and you don't clog up the filters and spray heads. So now that I've turned it on, I can see how far they're spraying. Now I can dial the radius in just right. And then I can see how far they're overspraying. And I can actually adjust how far they spray by turning the main valve down on the actual valve. In some situations, you can use the valve adjustment to a certain degree. But some heads you may need to spray further than others. In that case, you would have to do it on the individual sprinkler head. Now I brought some nice topsoil in here, a good 2 inches of topsoil. This is mixed with, blended with compost. I'll spread this out real evenly. I'll leave it about 3/4 of an inch below all the edges that I'll meet, and that'll allow for my sod to set in and not be up too high and not be too low. You can kind of see the fencing in the background, and we go into a little bit more detail of the entire build in the next part, which is part 4. Actually see the post columns going in part 2. Now what I like to do before I even lay sod, normally I flood it a good 24 hours before I even get the sod. I get it really good and wet and let it settle down a little bit wherever it needs to, and then take a look at it, and then do another final grading of it, and then you're ready for sod. Because if you go in here and just kind of loosely rake it around, lay your sod, and then you start watering, you may have some settlement issues, and now your lawn is not flat. So you want to water the dirt before you get your sod and take out those little problems that may arrive before you get the sod down, like sinkholes and loose soil that's settled with water, things like that. Now, the way we're cutting this sod is a nice little technique, and it's just a used concrete trowel, a well-used concrete trowel that's razor sharp. It serves two purposes in this case. It cuts the sod very easily, and it also acts as a straight edge to kind of flatten the area out before you lay each strip. Because as you're walking over it, you're leaving divots and knee holes from your toes and your knees. So you're going to be having to flatten that out. And now you have a multi-tool, basically a cutter and a grader within one. And that's a concrete trowel. That was your subgrade you seen there. And that was a little out of order, but that's what the subgrade looked like. You got to get that flat as well. If you don't get your subgrade flat, and then you have another material on top of that, the settlement is going to be different, because different types of soil settle at different rates and compact at different ratios. So each layer of whatever material you're wearing has to be level. Otherwise, your finished product won't be level. Now, if you notice the sod, I also stagger the joints on every piece, so we don't have straight lines running all the way up. Each joint of each piece of sod is staggered on the other one. This is a Marathon 2. They have a Marathon 1, a Marathon 3. The 1 is their original, 2 is a little modified, and 3 gets pretty fine. The number 1 has the widest grass, and then it gets a little thinner as it goes to 2 and 3. Nice thing about Marathon 2 is it stays green year round. And it's pretty hardy, even for animals, foot traffic, stuff like that. It recovers pretty well. Now here's some nice lighting, and this particular lighting, it only takes about 1.4 watts, and it's producing about, on your old type lights, not the LED, but those are going, it's producing about 15 watts basically with 1.4. Instead of a 200 watt transformer, you're only going to need about a 50 watt when you go with LED. Actually, these particular lights, they don't even have light bulbs in them. I don't know how it's producing the light, but however it is, it's pretty nice. Here's your timer. I like the Rainbird timers. Real easy to use. You have one neutral wire, and that neutral has to be tied into all the valves. And then each color represents a zone. Since we have only 2 zones, that's basically 3 wires going into that. One neutral and in each zone. Here's your Hampton Bay. This is what we got here. It also has a light sensor. that has to be located outside. I went through the vent, an actual vent. We just had to put a little hole in the screen, put the light sensor to the outside. That way it'll automatically turn on when it gets dark. And then we set it to stay on after dark. We set it to stay on until about 11 p.m. And then it'll shut off. But you can set it any time you want. You can even set it to come on at a specific time. It's all digital. It's real easy to use. Set the time of day, and then set how you want to run it. If you don't want to use the light sensor, it comes with a cap, so you can just leave it in the dark mode. Anyway, that's kind of what the final product looks like. Stay tuned. Watch part 4. If you like these videos, subscribe and hit the bell. That way you'll get the next videos as we upload them, and you won't miss anything. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.